Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. Jake had always trusted Emily. She was the charm and heartbeat of his mundane days, bringing laughter and a sparkle that seemed untouchable by the grays of routine life. When she started attending weekend meetings for a project she was passionate about, Jake didn't think twice. He believed in giving space, in trusting without chains. But, as the Saturdays stretched into silent hours and the return smiles grew tired, a whisper of doubt began to hum in his mind. It was unlike Emily to be so distant, her texts so sparse and delayed. Love, he thought, was no place for doubt. Yet, there he was, feeling the cold seep through the cracks of their once warm home. Working late again this Saturday? Jake asked one evening, trying to keep his voice light as he watched Emily pack her sleek, leather bag. Yes, the project's at a critical stage. Just a few more weeks and I'll have my weekends back, Emily replied, pressing a swift kiss to his cheek, her perfume, a mix of jasmine and something metallic he couldn't place, lingering in the air after she pulled away. Jake nodded, forcing a smile. I understand. Just miss you is all. Her smile, quick and rehearsed, didn't reach her eyes. I miss you too. Love you. Love you more, Jake responded, the words hollow, not from lack of love, but from the creeping tendrils of suspicion. After she left, the silence grew heavier, the rooms of their home holding his unease like a thick fog. Compelled by a force he couldn't resist, Jake did something he never thought he'd do. He installed a tracking app on Emily's phone one night while she slept beside him. The betrayal of privacy, of their vows, weighed on him, but the gnawing uncertainty was worse. The next Saturday, Jake decided to confirm his trust, to dispel the shadows or confront them. He drove to the address Emily had scribbled on her notepad, supposedly the site of her critical meetings. But there was nothing there. Just an empty parking lot and the distant hum of the city. Panic laced with betrayal gripped him as he checked the app. The little blinking dot showed an address on the outskirts, a place wrapped in rumors and caution, an abandoned house known to all but frequented by none. His heart hammered against his ribs as he took off towards the location, each mile a tightening noose of dread. Arriving at the desolate house, Jake's breaths came out in misty clouds. The broken windows, the unhinged door swinging silently in the wind, it was a scene from a nightmare. He moved towards the faint sounds of laughter that seemed so out of place in this forsaken lot. Inside, the sight tore through him like jagged glass. Emily, with nothing but shadows clinging to her skin, her laughter mingling with a man whose face twisted the knife in Jake's heart. Rage and shock warred within him as he stepped forward, the floorboards groaning under the weight of his broken heart. Emily. His voice was a thunderclap in the silent ruin. The laughter died, and two pairs of guilty eyes snapped to him. Emily scrambled, wrapping a discarded jacket around her. The man, just a blur to Jake's sense of betrayal, stood, an apology stammering to life on his lips, one that Jake had no patience to hear. How could you? Jake's voice broke, the words barely a whisper but heavy with devastation. Emily's face crumbled, the truth naked and glaring between them. Jake, But he was done. No words could unsee, could untell. He turned on his heel and walked out, the cold now a fierce ally against the heat of his searing pain. The drive home was a blur, his decisions clear and sharp. She came home later, to a house stripped of her belongings and a note that severed what dreams they had built together. By the time the dust settled, Emily was gone from his life, the locks changed, her keys left on the porch. The betrayal was deep, but Jake was determined to rebuild, to find trust in life once more, even if the shadows sometimes whispered doubts in the quiet of lonely nights. A month had trickled past since the day Jake's world had tilted on its axis. The rawness of Emily's betrayal lingered like a stubborn fog, but life, stubborn and unyielding, pressed him onward. He immersed himself in work and solitary jogs, anything to keep the silence at bay. Yet, it was during one such run that his past caught up to him. The park was speckled with the colors of an early fall, leaves crunching underfoot as Jake rounded the bend. That's when he spotted Ben, an old friend and colleague of Emily's, stretched on a bench, his face buried in a book. "Ben!" Jake called out, more out of surprise than the desire for conversation. Ben looked up, his expression morphing from relaxation to concern within a heartbeat. "Jake, hey, how have you been holding up?" His voice carried a hint of awkwardness as he patted the bench beside him. "Not great, but getting by," Jake admitted, sitting down, his breath forming clouds in the cool air. "What about you? How's everything at the firm?" "Same old, but..." "Listen, I heard about Emily. I'm really sorry, man. If there's anything I can do," Ben's offer trailed off, genuine in his empathy. Jake managed a half-smile. "Thanks, but I think it's just something I need to handle on my own. Actually, I'm trying to figure it all out still. How could I have missed the signs?" Ben hesitated, his fingers drumming on the book cover. Emily was always good at keeping her personal life out of work. But there was something off in the last few months. She seemed anxious, secretive even. "Secretive?" Jake echoed, a spike of interest piercing his fog of resignation. "Yeah. She kept taking calls out of earshot, always typing away on her phone. I didn't think much of it, assumed it was project stuff. But then she mentioned you less and less." Jake's jaw tightened. "Did she mention anyone else? Someone new, maybe?" "There was this guy, Dan, came on a few months ago. They worked closely together, seemed to have hit it off. I didn't think anything of it, just work friends, you know." Ben's tone was careful, but his words stirred a storm inside Jake. Dan. The name was a shard of ice in his chest. "Yeah. Nice guy, or so I thought. After everything that happened. I don't know, man." Jake's mind raced. Another piece of the puzzle, another whisper in the dark. He needed answers, needed to understand why. "Do you think he could be the guy, with her?" Ben shrugged, uncomfortable. "I can't say for sure, but it's possible." The conversation lingered a bit longer, mostly filled with Ben's attempts to lift Jake's spirits. But as they parted ways, a plan began to crystallize in Jake's mind. He would confront this Dan, seek out the truth directly from the source of his torment. If Emily wouldn't give him the answers he needed, perhaps her accomplice would. Later that evening, Jake sat in his car outside the firm where Emily and Dan worked, waiting for the shadows to lengthen and for Dan to emerge. The building spilled out its occupants slowly, tired workers eager to escape their cubicles. Then, there he was, Dan, walking confidently down the steps, oblivious to the storm about to break over him. Jake stepped out, his approach firm and decided. "Dan." Dan turned, surprise etching his features. "Yes. Can I help?" "It's about Emily. I know you were with her. I need to know why." The confrontation unfolded not with the violence of anger, but with the quiet intensity of shattered trust. Dan faltered under Jake's gaze, the truth eventually spilling forth in hushed tones between the echo of departing footsteps. As Jake drove home, the streetlights blurring past, he wasn't sure if he felt more settled or more uprooted by the revelations. But one thing was clear, the path to healing was still long and wound through dark places he had yet to explore. And somewhere in that darkness, the answers lay waiting. The cold air bites at Jake's cheeks as he leaves the confrontation with Dan, the secrets spilled between them still echoing in his ears. Dan had admitted to the affair with Emily, his words a mix of regret and resignation. Yet, something about Dan's confession didn't sit right with Jake, it was too pat, too convenient. As he drives home, his mind races, weaving through the debris of his broken trust and the nagging feeling that there's more to the story. Later that week, Jake finds himself at a local bar, the dim lights flickering like the shadows of his thoughts. He's nursing a beer when he overhears a conversation from the table next to him, a group of guys from his gym, talking about one of their friends caught up in a scandalous affair. "Man, can you believe it? And with a married woman, no less," one of them says, his voice tinged with both judgment and thrill. Jake's ears prick up. The description sounds uncomfortably familiar. Pushing his drink aside, he leans in slightly, trying to catch more without drawing attention. "Yeah, but the crazy part is her husband showed up one day, right at the place they were meeting. It was all planned out by her, some twisted game," another chimes in, shaking his head. The conversation hits too close to home. Anger and curiosity surge in Jake's veins. He decides to interject, feigning a casual interest. "Sounds intense. Who's the guy?" The men look up, wary of sharing too much, but one, perhaps loosened by alcohol, shrugs. "Some dude named Dan. Works downtown. You probably don't know him." Jake's heart hammers against his chest. "And the woman?" he probes, trying to sound nonchalant. "Dunno, really. Heard she's pretty high up in some firm. It's messed up, right?" Thanking them with a nod, Jake stands, his mind reeling. If Emily had orchestrated their encounter, if it was all a game, what was her endgame? The pieces don't fully connect, and the gaps gnaw at him. Determined for more answers, Jake decides to revisit the abandoned house where he caught Emily. As he steps through the threshold, the memories flood back, the images of betrayal vivid and stinging. He wanders through the desolate rooms, searching for anything that might have been overlooked, any clue to Emily's motives. In the dusty light, a glint catches his eye. It's a small, digital camera, half hidden under a loose floorboard. With a surge of adrenaline, he retrieves it, wondering if it holds the answers he seeks. Back in his car, he powers on the camera. The screen flickers to life, revealing a series of videos and pictures, dates and times stamping each one. Jake's breath catches as he clicks on a video dated the day he confronted Emily. The video begins, shaky and grainy, but unmistakably showing Emily and Dan. They are laughing, but as Jake watches, the mood shifts. Emily's face turns serious, her voice low but audible. "We need to be careful, Dan. If he finds out." Dan's response is muffled, but Jake's heart sinks as he listens to the rest of their conversation. They speak of someone else, someone powerful and dangerous, someone who had orchestrated their meeting, someone Emily feared. As the video ends, Jake sits frozen, the camera slipping from his hands. The betrayal was deeper and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Emily hadn't just cheated, he and she were pawns in someone else's game, a game that was far from over. Fueled by a new, fierce determination to uncover the whole truth, Jake starts the engine. He has new leads to follow, new dangers to confront. Whoever is pulling the strings, he vows to expose them, no matter the cost. Jake drives through the city with the weight of the world on his shoulders, the camera's revelations replaying in his mind. The game was more convoluted, the stakes higher than he ever imagined. Someone powerful had manipulated Emily and Dan into their affair, but why? And who was behind it? His first stop is the firm where Emily worked, hoping to gather more information from her colleagues, particularly those who might know about the mysterious orchestrator. As he steps into the buzzing office, a familiar face catches his eye, Mara, Emily's closest friend at work. "Mara," Jake calls out, his voice firm yet fraught with urgency. Mara turns, her expression tense when she sees Jake. "Jake, what are you doing here? After everything?" "I need answers, Mara. About Emily and everything that's been going on. I know there's someone else pulling the strings." "I saw the videos," Jake admits, showing her the camera. Mara's eyes widen, a flash of fear, or perhaps guilt, crossing her features. "Jake, you need to be careful. This is bigger than you think." "Who is it, Mara? Who's orchestrating this?" Jake presses, his voice a mix of desperation and resolve. Sighing, Mara glances around nervously before leaning closer. "It's Mr. Darrow, the CEO. He had a thing for Emily. When she rejected him, he concocted this entire scenario to discredit her, to get revenge. Dan was just a pawn, like Emily. Jake reels back, the information hitting him like a physical blow. Mr. Darrow, the respected CEO, at the center of this deceitful web. Why didn't Emily tell me? She was scared, Jake. Scared for you, for her career. She thought she could handle it, Mara whispers, her own fear palpable. Fueled by a new, burning clarity, Jake heads to confront Mr. Darrow, each step heavier than the last. He bypasses startled secretaries and bursts into Darrow's office, confronting the man with a controlled fury. Darrow. It's over. I know everything, Jake announces, standing defiantly in the office, the cityscape sprawling behind the powerful figure who rises from his desk with an unruffled calm. Darrow smirks, a cold, menacing sound. You think you have the upper hand here, Mr. Stevens? You're merely an inconvenience. I have proof of what you've done. The videos, the testimonies from Emily and Dan. You'll pay for this, Jake retorts, his resolve hardening. Darrow's demeanor shifts, the facade cracking. You're a fool if you think you can expose me without any repercussions. I can make this all go away, and ruin you in the process. But Jake is undeterred, the fire of justice fueling his courage. I'm not afraid of you. This ends today. The confrontation escalates, voices raised and accusations hurled, until Jake's phone buzzes. A message from Emily, she's outside, ready to tell the truth to the authorities, to face whatever comes for the sake of their future. As Darrow realizes the gravity of the situation, his arrogance fades, replaced by a dawning fear. Security bursts in at his command, but it's too late. The authorities follow, led by Emily, who walks in with a determined grace, her fear eclipsed by resolution. In the aftermath, as Darrow is taken away, Emily approaches Jake. I'm so sorry, Jake. I should have been honest with you from the start. Jake looks at Emily, the love he once felt now overshadowed by betrayal and deceit. I understand why you did it, but I can't. We can't go back. Emily nods, tears glistening in her eyes. I know. I just hope one day you can forgive me. They part ways outside the building, going their separate directions, Jake towards a future shrouded in uncertainty but free from deceit, and Emily to rebuild her life, forever marked by the consequences of her decisions. In the silence of his car, Jake reflects on the tangled webs of deceit and the cost of truth. He had loved deeply, trusted fully, and though the betrayal burned, he knew the journey ahead was his alone, a path toward healing and perhaps, eventually, forgiveness.